You could do everything else right. And if you screw up the interview, game is over. Everything you do leads up to the interview. You write a resume, you write a cover letter. Well, why are you doing that? You're trying to get an interview for a real opportunity. So you do all of that work to get to this moment, and this moment determines the quality of your career and the quality of your life.
Wellness, career, service, whole you. Insights on living a balanced, purposeful life. Welcome to Whole You TV. I'm Shannon O'Brien. Today I'm super excited to have Mr. Michael Neese with us here to talk about how to master your next interview. Michael Neese is the CEO of InterviewMastery.com, the world's most widely used video program used by over 54,000 people in 73 countries. A TEDx speaker, Michael has contributed to or appeared on NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox News, Financial Times, The Wall Street Journal, The Washington Post, U.S. News and World Report, and the New York Times. Michael holds degrees in physics and engineering and has worked as an engineer, a recruiter, and VP of talent acquisitions for 3 Fortune 50 companies and several hyper-growth startups. He's the father of 3 children, co-founder of 7 companies, and an instrument-rated pilot who loves seaplanes. How interesting. Michael, thanks so much for being on Whole You TV.
Oh, happy to be here.
So as you may know, Whole You and Whole You TV focuses on topics of wellness, career, and service. But today we're mainly focusing on the career aspect because you are an interviewing guru. And so many people mess up in their interviews, and that's really the reason that they don't get the job. So I hope that this interview between you and I today will help people improve their own interviewing skills so that they can perform better in their next interview.
Awesome.
Cool.
So before we begin, you might want to tell people how we met.
Yeah. Well, do you want to tell?
You just never know what's going to happen in an elevator. When you get into an elevator with a strange woman, you just never know what's going to happen. And you exchange business cards and you share with each other what you do. And we've become collaborators ever since.
As they say, elevator pitch, and they really
Yes.
did. And I think we were in an elevator. We were going
Yes.
to an event about building our own websites,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really quick. You know, we only
Yes.
had a couple minutes. This is what I do. This is what you do. Wow, we got it right away. And then I went on to be an adjunct professor at Suffolk and brought you in to speak. And you were, you know, the highlight of the semester. Everyone really loved your speech. So yeah, we've gone on and on with collaboration. So exactly, you never know who you're going to meet in an elevator.
Yes.
Yes. So with that said, thank you so much for being here. I just spoke a little bit about your course, your online course, Interview Mastery. But can you tell us a little bit more about how you started it?
The essence of how it got started was when I was a recruiter and my livelihood depended on finding people, finding jobs, having them get an offer, go to work, and stay there at least 3 months. Or I didn't eat. I didn't pay my mortgage. I didn't feed my children. So I was working at a national recruiting firm. First I was a newbie recruiter, and then I was there for 11 years. So eventually I had a team of 6 recruiters. We were all engineers, former engineers. And we quickly realized that everything came down to the interview. Because we had this experience, we had perfectly qualified candidates that would go on interviews, and they wouldn't get hired. And then other people that were just barely qualified, the employers were jumping up and down going, oh, this candidate's awesome. And we're thinking, what the heck is going on? The most qualified people are not getting hired. So we realized our income depended on this interview. So being good engineers, we did a bunch of analysis and did some, testing and tried prepping people different ways. And it eventually evolved into this lifelong, career-long product called Interview Mastery. And it first started out helping individuals so that they could get hired faster, advance their careers just by doing better at interviews. And then now it's used by recruiters so that they make more money because they place people more often. There's another product used by employers that helps them interview people better and faster, actually 47% faster. And the other surprise was that executive coaches use it to complement their in-person services because a lot of people are in transition when they use an executive coach.
And as a coach or as an advisor, I certainly want to share your program with other people because I focus on interviewing, but not as in-depth as your program does. Can you maybe break down the program?
So there's the long version, which has 51 videos, and you're thinking, oh my God, I can't possibly watch that many, and nobody ever watches all of them. What they do is there's 15 core videos that give you kind of the best practices of how to do well, but then there's also special situations that people encounter. For example, they might be somebody who talks too much. Well, how do you know if you talk too much, and what do you do about it? Or you may be coming out of the military, or you may have a disability, or you may be asked an illegal question. So you can see very quickly how I've gotten to 51 special situations. One that came up about 6 months ago, one of the recruiters that was using Interview Mastery to prep his candidates, he had an executive vice president of marketing do a Skype interview, and he was just magnificently qualified. Did the Skype interview and completely blew it. And it was about managing the technology. Yeah, he could turn on the camera, but he didn't worry. Yeah, so anyway, after that, right after that event, the recruiter called me. He said, Michael, you've got to help me. I just had an executive vice president blow the Skype interview. I'm out 30 grand opportunity. So that was how another module got created.
We're seeing people needing to do a Skype interview or prepare a video with, pre-recorded or pre-asked questions. And I would imagine that people get really nervous because you're in front of this computer, in front of this technology that's separating you between, you and the other person. And it's nerve-wracking. So what kind of tips do you give people? Because it's now more common to use technology to interview. What tips do you give people to do really well when they're needing to do an interview on Skype or record a video?
Yeah, this is about getting used to an even more unusual situation. So on your computer, that there's a little green light that goes on when you're being videotaped. And so I might be having an initial screen, and my interviewers, there might be 5 of them in a conference room with this massive TV, and there's this huge image of me looking at the top of my head, and I'm looking down. So what I have to get used to doing is looking at that little green light, which is now what I'm doing is I'm looking at the green light, and you just have to practice. So you can do, you can do a Zoom or a Skype interview and just practice looking at that green light. And I should have turned off. I thought I turned that off. Another thing is turn everything else off. So
that's actually good timing.
Yes. The other thing you have to do is manage the light that's on your face and worry about what's behind you. For this interview, I made sure I had a curtain behind me that wasn't distracting. But if you had, my pet canary flying back and forth, now that's really distracting. Or if my cat jumps on me, actually, I don't have a cat or a canary. But you have to insulate yourself, just like you were going on an interview. You're going to be in a room with another person, and you want to minimize the distractions and make sure you're not wearing your favorite rock band t-shirt. Make sure that you didn't, it's not 3 weeks old, because they can see you. You want to dress up just like you're going to be on an interview as well, because it is an interview. And, just because it's not in person doesn't mean it doesn't count. It actually counts a great deal, because they're not only going to have this video, they're going to save the video and they're going to share it internally. So you want to, again, first impressions, lasting impressions, you want to make sure that you do it extremely well, and just pay attention to those little details. They're going to make all the difference.
I feel like perhaps people don't really practice on their own. Do people practice before they go into an interview live, or even?
Oh, gosh. Oh yes, and it's easy. It's easy to practice. Make a list of the questions that you expect. Just 2 or 3 of them. Tell me about yourself. Can you tell me about a situation that prepares you well for this position? What are your salary expectations? Give me a weakness. Now also write down 2 or 3 questions you're really afraid they're going to ask you, and then plan out your response. And you call up a friend of yours and say, I need to practice for this important interview. And all I need you to do is we'll get together. All I need you to do is ask me, just read the questions that I wrote. And they're happy to do you. Your friends want to help you. They don't know how to help you.
Right.
And they know that, you've networked with them, and they'd like to make an introduction, but they're frustrated. They want to help you. So call them up, ask them to interview you, and don't go to a coffee shop and try and do this. Gosh.
Try to simulate the
Yeah.
environment that you might
Yep.
be in an interview.
Yes. So call one of your employed friends, say, hey, could you interview me in one of your conference rooms? The other thing you can do during the course of that simulated interview is you can ask them, how was that? And please tell me the truth. They might say, well, you said or ah. We have these habits and we're completely unaware of them. But when somebody makes you aware of them, then you can change them. I used to say all the time.
Really?
Oh my gosh, it was annoying for me even. What I trained myself to do was substitute it for silence. So it's like I go, it's like I just don't make any noise, because if you don't say anything, people are going, oh my gosh, this is going to be awesome. He's really thinking about this. But if I go, for sure, you've just communicated. You have no idea what you're going to say next, and you're looking for the answer. So just don't say anything.
I heard you say when you are in an interview, you have common questions that you should prepare for. You had mentioned salary, what are your strengths and weaknesses, tell me about yourself.
Yes.
An anecdote, when my father was interviewing at McGraw-Hill in New York City, one of the first questions he got was, tell me about yourself. And rather than saying, well, I was born in New Jersey and I like playing golf, it was, this is why I am a perfect fit for your job. And I always remember him telling me about that experience, and he ended up getting the job because the woman the woman who was screening him said, okay, we're going to get you in with the big guys right away.
Yeah.
The job description was asking for these things.
Yes.
Said, well, I have these things, and lined it up perfectly for them. And actually, my dad and I use this hand gesture to say you really want to illustrate that you're a perfect fit. So
yes, that's
so tell me about yourself. I think that's a good way to answer that. But you had mentioned some other things that I think people get asked a lot but feel very uncomfortable with. So the strengths and weaknesses question, the salary question. Let's start with salary. I know that people are very uncomfortable asking about salary. And in fact, I heard that it's now illegal in many states to ask about salary. But what would you suggest that people respond when they're asked about salary?
Your goal is to not give them a number. So you say, well, I'd rather not give you a number. I'd like to emphasize that here's the most important things when I select the job. And you describe the things that are most important to you. Quality of the position, quality of the team, quality of the opportunity for growth. And compensation is like 5th or 6th on the list. Now, I'm sure you're going to make me the best offer that you can, but let's first decide whether or not I'm the right person for the job. All right? So that's one way to do it. Now, if they come back and say, oh, come on, Michael, give me a number.
Right.
Just say, listen, I know you need to make sure that my salary expectations are aligned with the salary range. I have no idea what the salary range is. Well, why don't you just tell me what the range is and I'll tell you how I fit in? That works most of the time. It works like over 90% of the time, even if you're talking to an experienced recruiter. So places like Massachusetts, California, and there's lots of other states that have passed state laws that make it illegal to ask about compensation. Pretty soon it's going to be a national federal law. So they're very careful how they get that information. Now, if they ask you, what's your current compensation? They're breaking the law. If they ask you what your salary expectations are, that's okay.
Because if you say that your salary is low now, but you're really qualified to do this job, and they happen to be, their range is higher than you're making now, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself. Actually, they say that about women getting into the workplace and not being negotiated sets them up for lower growth over time.
Yes.
You want to negotiate in advance to get yourself on the right track.
Yes, very true.
Another thing that you mentioned is the strengths and weaknesses question, that notorious, what are your strengths and weaknesses? How do you answer the weaknesses question, or what's your advice for that?
Yeah, so there's 2 different types of weakness questions. One is, what are your weaknesses? Or give me a weakness. And the second one is where they ask you about a specific experience they're looking for where you don't have it. So they're like pointing their finger right at a weakness that you have. And a very common one is lack of industry experience. First thing you want to do is stay away from anything that relates to the job. You don't want to point out, you don't want to give them a reason to reject you. So what you would do is identify an area that used to be a weakness and you did something about it. So maybe you wanted to learn a language. So, well, I used to have this weakness. I really always wanted to learn Spanish. So what I did was I took a course, and I'm getting better and better, and I practice regularly using, a foreign language. So what I'm doing here is I'm identifying a weakness that I have or that I used to have. The key part is, here's what I did about it. All right, the second weakness situation is where you have a real weakness. So what you do is you're going to respond by highlighting an experience that you have where you had to do something you've never done before. The first step is you validate. You say, that's a good question. It's the first thing you do. That's a good question. Okay. Second thing you say is, let me give you some more information. So you're going to educate them. So validate, educate. Third is you provide an example where you did something you've never done before. So in my current position, I was given a project leadership role over a project, a level of complexity that I'd never handled before, and this was a brand new industry. So here's the things that I did. Here's the results we got. The next thing is I'm going to express my confidence. You say, well, I'm confident that I'll be able to get up to speed very quickly in learning this particular industry based on the demonstrated ability that I have to learn new things very quickly. The last thing you say is you ask them a question. You're like, did I give you enough information?
It sounds like interviewing can be pretty complicated. You need to prepare. It's not always it's sort of an artificial experience. You're putting on a show, so to speak. You can't fully be yourself.
Correct.
So there's a lot to think about, and no wonder people get really nervous.
Yeah.
I know that I've been there myself when I used to interview for jobs, get very, very nervous. What do you find are the biggest mistakes that people make when they're interviewing?
They actually, the mistake occurs even before they get there. It's the assumption that they make. They assume it's going to be an interrogation, meaning the interviewer is going to ask all the questions and my job is just to provide all the answers. That's actually not an interview, that's an interrogation. Whether you get interviewed or interrogated is completely your fault. And here's why. If someone asks you a question and then you provide some answers and then you just sit there and look at them, they are forced to ask you a question. If at the end of your answer, you say something like, did I give you enough detail, or was I clear on that? Would you like, talk about that further? You're just kind of tagging on a question at the end. Now, all of a sudden, you're facilitating a conversation where both people are asking questions, both people are providing information. Mm-hmm. If you don't ask one of those little tag-on questions, you force them to interrogate you. Mm-hmm. And what happens is when you're giving an answer and the interviewer knows that you're not going to ask a question at the end, they know that. So when you get to the end of your answer where you're building to this great crescendo to make this beautiful, impressive point, they stop listening. They're starting to figure out, what the heck am I going to ask next? By asking questions, you are facilitating a two-way conversation, and your interviewer starts to get a lot more comfortable and go, oh, all right, we're going to have a conversation here. Mm. The other thing that your questions provide you with is immediate feedback on the accuracy of how you're communicating. Like if you say, yeah, did I give you enough detail, or was I clear on that? You might get answers like, well, no, can you give me a little bit more information about that? Or no, that wasn't what I was looking for. Can you tell me really about this? And they may have asked a shitty question. Oh, sorry. Reset. They may have asked a ineffective question. They knew what they wanted to get for information from you, but they didn't phrase it in a way that solicited the right kind of information from you. So by you asking a question like, did I give you the right information? Was I clear on that? They may say, well, no, I was looking for something else. So you're course correcting during the course of the interview so that you make the best presentation you can.
I really like that suggestion. It's a great technique to have more of a dialogue, and makes you feel more comfortable that it's a give and take, and it's not just you on the hot seat.
Yes.
One thing I really want you to elaborate on is the story that you told when you came to speak at the course at Suffolk, was when you gave the example of when you were a recruiter and they were looking for a particular type of engineer. Do you remember that story?
Oh, I remember it very well.
That was,
Surface mount technology manufacturing engineer.
if you could
Yep.
tell that story in the punchline, I tell it to my clients over
Oh,
and
yeah.
over again because I think it's so important.
Yes. This was a lesson that I learned as a recruiter. The lesson is the most qualified person never, ever gets hired. One of my clients was a manufacturing company. They were setting up a new factory. They wanted a very specialized manufacturing process engineer that knew surface mount technology. There were 6 of them at the time, and they all knew each other, and they all agreed who was the best, who was second best, who was third best, who was fourth, and then the other 2. So I recruited all of them. It was easy. As soon as I got to one of them, then I added the rest of them. And so the hiring manager, who was the plant manager, I told him this story. I said, listen, I have all 6 of them, and they all agree who's the top dog. Why don't you just interview the best one, and we can go right to the end? Well, hiring manager thought this was awesome. Let's do that. So they meet, they have an interview. After the first interview, the hiring manager says, I'm not so sure that's the right person. I don't know if they're going to fit. I said, all right, let's interview the second best person. He interviews the second best person. Same story. Well, I'm not really sure about her either. Third best person, same story. We got to the 4th best person. He loved her. He thought she was perfect. Now, this is the 4th most qualified person in this tiny little expertise. So that taught me the most qualified person never gets hired. Who's the most qualified is an opinion. It's an opinion documented on a job description. It's also the subjective opinions of your interviewers. An interview is not an analytical, logical process. It is a subjective, emotional adventure, both for the interviewer and the interviewee. If they like you, they're going to hire you. If they believe you can do the job and they like you, they're going to hire you.
Exactly.
No matter how qualified you are.
Exactly. That was the punchline. Is like, it's not about how qualified, it's likability. And I tell that to clients to make them feel better and allow them to be themselves rather than try to be robotic and answer all the questions right so that you're qualified. But just remember that likability. Can they see you on their team? Can they see going out to lunch with you? Will they, will you fit into the company culture? So the likability is really what it comes down to. So I love that story, and I do repeat it often.
Yeah. Yes, there's other questions you can ask at the end of an interview. One of them relates to who you might fit in. So if you haven't prepared anything, if you haven't prepared a list of questions, just ask potentially these 3 questions at the end of the interview. First, you ask them, what strengths do you think I bring to this position? So the second question, which is actually the most important one, is you say, what concerns do you have? You're trying to weed the garden. And a concern is a weed that will overwhelm all the positive impressions that you've made. Right. And we grow over time. So if they say, well, I'm concerned about your lack of industry experience, then you can overcome it. You can say, that's a really good question. Let me give you some more information. Bang. The third question you can ask at the end is, how do you think my style will fit with the team? I did not ask whether or not I'd fit. I said, how do you think I will fit? Now, just asking that question is impressive because you're communicating the fact that you realize that fit is really important component here. The questions you ask is that's where your influence comes from. And they'll be much more impressed by the questions you ask than any of the points that you try to make.
Nice.
Yeah.
So knowing all that you know, when you're preparing a client for an interview, what's the kind of sequence, kind of start to finish, before you get in the interview to the very end?
All right. So we've done before, during, and what do you do at the end? Yes, you're going to follow up. Now, people ask me, well, do I follow up with an email? Do I write a snail mail? I said, you do both. Yes, you have to send your thank you email right away. And the way you get the email addresses is you ask everybody for a business card while you're there. Make sure you bring plenty of your own. And make sure you bring several hard copies, old school hard copies of your resume. Because they might forget it. They may not have read it. And also write a handwritten thank you note. It used to be the rule that you must do that. So few people do it now. It's a way for you to differentiate yourself.
With the follow-up, you said email, also send a snail mail card or letter. And then after that, is it people say, I did everything right. I did all of those steps and I still haven't heard anything.
Yes.
I mean, can you call up, even though the job description oftentimes says, don't call us? And then there's radio silence. I think the interview went so well, and I really want to know. Either way, just tell me.
Yeah.
The verdict.
Maddening. It's maddening. Yes. And when the hiring manager or the HR person says, this went awesome, I'm going to call you at the end of the week. You're thinking, awesome. They're lying. They just don't know they're lying because stuff gets in the way. Regular business course, and they, and before they know it, it's the end of the week and nothing's happened. And they go, oh, well, I'll call him or her on Monday. Meanwhile, you're waiting for the call on Friday afternoon. They said they were going to call. If they don't call you, you call them.
Okay.
Just say that you're being professionally persistent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was a great summary. And like you said, that's all available on Interview Mastery. So now that we're on the subject of your course, how can people purchase your course?
Oh, they can go to interviewmastery.com, and there you'll see a box that says candidates, and you click there and you can sign up for a series of free videos that shows you samples of what you'll get. And then if you like what you see, then you can purchase Interview Mastery. You'll get everything for $97, and you'll be able to use it for a whole year.
Nice. So I like that try before you buy aspect. Provide the link below this video so people can go to the link, check out the free videos, see if it's for them, see if it's a fit for them preparing for their next interview and having all this information that you're providing. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience about how to master their interview?
It's such a rare, artificial business event that we rarely experience, and people don't even think they need to practice or even prepare. It's remarkable, and their livelihood depends on it.
Using the word artificial, I think that's why people get so nervous, because it is so artificial. It doesn't feel real. So everyone's dressing up in a monkey suit and feeling that they need to go through this rigmarole, and it doesn't feel authentic, and yet people need to be authentic. So
yes.
There's a dichotomy there.
And the interviewers are, most of the time, they're just as nervous because they have no idea what they're doing. No idea what they're doing. And they ask dumb things. You actually have the most amount of influence and control during this interview. They also need you a whole lot more than you need them, because there's going to be another opportunity. They have problems to solve. They really want you to be the one when you go in there, as opposed to, folding their arms and saying, oh, well, I'm going to assume this candidate's lying to me. And, people do that.
Yeah.
But just know that you're unique on this planet. Nobody can do what you can do. You're not a commodity, and that they have business problems to solve. And each one of those interviewers, they don't want to interview any more than you want to be the interviewee. They really want to get back to their job. So they want you to be the right one. They're cheering for you.
That's a beautiful pep talk. And I think that's a great psychological switch that we don't always think about. They want you to be the next hire. Great mindset to go in with.
Yes.
Oh, perfect.